the Oilers have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They're monsters on offense for the Edmonton Oilers. No other team has this setup on their rosters right now. Once upon a time, the Pittsburgh Penguins did when they had Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, both Hart Trophy winners and both at the top of their games. But that was a few years ago. And here we are now, McDavid and Draisaitl. The Oilers are winning a lot to start the year. McDavid had a multi-point game streak going. Draisaitl scored in most games. We've seen a game where Draisaitl gets more points than McDavid. So if one guy's not necessarily quote unquote on, and that's saying a lot because McDavid and Draisaitl are two of the best, the other guy can pick up the slack.
Yeah, and you kind of need a dynamic duo to be really successful in this league. And you look at the teams that have won Stanley Cups in the past. You look at Kane and Taves, and obviously Yager and Lemieux, Malkin and Crosby. Some people in Toronto will argue that Marner and Matthews are kind of in that territory as well. But I do think that the Oilers have the two elite players in the league in Draisaitl and McDavid. And you're right, and it's a luxury that Coach Dave Tippett can either play them together or play them apart. They obviously play together on the power play, and the Oilers' power play is absolutely lethal this year's season. It has been for the last 3 years. It's been just dominating. Can't get, but you're at a point where you can't take a penalty against the Oilers. It's a dynamic duo, and I think when you have these two guys, and the scary part about this is that really McDavid and Draisaitl have yet to reach their prime. They're getting there, but they're not there yet. They still have 4 or 5 years till they get to their prime NHL years, till they get to 27, 28, where they say that that's your prime NHL years. So I think the Oilers really have to make the most of the fact that they're getting these guys right now. They're at the top of their game. McDavid, every year he seems to take his game to a new level, which is remarkable considering what he's done since he got into the league. And then Draisaitl is a star player. He's a superstar player. He may not be as flashy. He may not be as dominant or as noticeable every time he's on the ice, but he's one of those guys you look at the score sheet and go, wow, he had a goal and 2 assists, or he had 2 goals and 2 assists, and he's a dominant NHL player. And I think right now the Oilers really have to take advantage of that. And I think this year they've done a good job of surrounding those two star players with a better supporting cast. And I would say that's the reason why the Oilers are 7-1 getting out of the gate going into their next game against Nashville, because they have a better supporting cast. Those guys are still driving the bus, but they don't have to get 3 or 4 points every night for the Oilers to win, which was the case last year or maybe the year before. Now they just have to do what they do, which is produce every night, at least a point or 2 points every night, and then let the other guys kind of chip in, and that's usually good enough for the Oilers to win right now.
I suppose what would be interesting is if one of McDavid or Draisaitl, for some reason, injury, would miss a bunch of games. We did see that 2 years ago in Draisaitl's Hart Trophy year when McDavid was out of action for, I want to say, a couple of weeks with an injury. But the Oilers didn't seem to lose a beat then, and that was 2 seasons ago. Because, yeah, I mentioned Crosby and Malkin off the hop, and, those two players are on the downside of their careers, not on the upswing. But even earlier in their careers, we did see Crosby and Malkin each miss time, but the other player stepped into those roles. I mean, we haven't quite seen that yet, not to that extent where Malkin or Crosby, for example, missed a bunch of time. Hitting that extra gear, knowing that, okay, I'm the guy now. I don't have Connor, Leon Draisaitl to, fall back on necessarily. Not that they're thinking that way when they're playing, but yeah, I need the extra responsibility, I suppose. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it does, and it happens, and we've seen it happen in the past. There was a lot of talk when the Sedins were around, that if one brother went down, would the other brother be able to function? I think we saw that did happen when one of them went down. To this day, I still can't tell the Sedins apart. So I can't remember if it was Henrik or Daniel that went down, but the other one took the mantle and ran with it. And we've seen that in Pittsburgh with when Malkin is taken with Crosby out. Crosby did miss that whole year with a concussion. He kind of took it on himself to go things forward. And I do believe that McDavid and Draisaitl have that ability as well. And I think Draisaitl had shown in the past that, yeah, he can be the number one guy if McDavid goes down. I think McDavid, he's learned from the past. He's not as reckless anymore when he attacks players, because he'll attack players one on one, he'll attack players 1-on-2, he'll attack guys 1-on-3. He's not afraid to do that, but I think he does it in a least reckless way now. So I think the odds of him getting hurt in that manner are kind of downgraded a little bit. But if it does happen, injuries happen in this league for whatever reason, I think the Oilers are content that, yeah, the one guy can step up and can take on some of those extra minutes and that extra responsibility. Obviously, the Oilers are better with both of them, but if it came down to needing one of them, I think they both have shown that they can kind of take on that extra responsibility, extra ice time, and extra duties.
Another player I think about when I think about, what if McDavid or Draisaitl missed time, and so one of those guys would basically be stepping into the number one center role, would be the effect on a guy like Ryan Nugent Hopkins, who of course was the number one overall pick 10 years ago. But once upon a time he was that top line player that the Oilers relied on before McDavid came along. And obviously, when you're in different roles, your opportunities are different. But Nugent Hopkins, and I know he's centered his own line when Draisaitl moves up to play with McDavid too. And I just be curious to see how that would work. Over a long span. Like heaven forbid someone got injured for 20 games or whatever. But it would be interesting in my mind.
Yeah, it would be, and I think Nugent Hopkins, his role is kind of uh, transformed since he first came into the league. When he came into the league, he came in as a number one center. He was going to be the Oilers' number one center for a long time. They thought back in the day when they drafted him, and his role kind of evolved. He became this checking center, became this real responsible two-way player. And I think right now he's a guy that if you have him centering your third line, that's a pretty good hockey team. If you have a guy like Ryan Nugent Hopkins centering your third line, and you look at that, McDavid is your first line center, Draisaitl is your second line center, Nugent Hopkins is your third line center. That's pretty strong down the middle, and I think you're not gonna find any other team that's strong down the middle. And now he's got some room to. He still is the strong, responsible checking center, but he's also has some offensive ability. And now there's so much attention on McDavid and Draisaitl that will open up opportunities for a guy like Ryan Nugent Hopkins to put up a few more points. And I think we're seeing that early on in the season. And he's still a very talented player. He still has great tools. He's a fantastic skater. He's a smart player. He's got a good shot. So I think all the tools are there. But I think Ryan Nugent Hopkins takes a lot of pride in that defensive side of his game. And so when you're on the third line, when you're setting the third line, then your job is to kind of be defensively responsible, then chip in offense. And then when he moves up to the second line, the center of that second line, when Draisaitl moves up to the top line with McDavid, then yeah, then he has to provide a bit more offense. But he's a guy that you can do that. You can move him up and down the lineup. You can play him in different situations, and I think he's a very valuable asset to this hockey team.
Although he isn't playing third line minutes right now with Derek Ryan here, but um, anyway, yeah, if we ever get to the situation where you want each of those guys centering their own line, yeah, I mean that would be very, I don't know, intimidating for any team.
Yeah, for sure it would be, and I think that's the luxury that they have. And you're right, he's playing second line right now. He's either on the wing or at center, but it's something that you can do. You can move him around, and I think that's what makes him so valuable.